Hello everybody, Claudia Boleyn here, and this was originally going to be a depression question and answer session about depression and mental health and all that kind of thing. But I've had so many asks, so many questions, that there was no way I'd be able to pack them all into one video. So I've decided to do a series of videos answering the questions, and I've kind of split them into different categories. So today's vlog is going to be, well, today's question and answer session is going to be specifically about self-harm. I should also warn you that I'm probably going to cry my makeup off in this video at some point, so don't worry about me if I get upset. It's obviously just a really personal topic and I think it's quite natural to get upset about it, so please don't worry about me. All the questions in today's video are anonymous questions, which I can totally understand. There's a huge stigma against people who self-harm, and I can totally see why you might not want to put your name to these questions, so that's absolutely fine. And I've chosen the questions which I think I can answer the best and which I think might be helpful as well, so I hope that this video is helpful to you in some way. Question number 1 is, when did you start self-harming and why? I was about 12 when I started. I didn't know what self-harming was, but I used to scratch my thumbs with safety pins when I was really upset and stressed and angry. I also used to starve myself, so I used to restrict my food intake, and I would go for about 3 days without eating until I thought I was going to pass out. And obviously looking back now, I can see that that is a self-harming behaviour. My aim wasn't to lose weight or anything. It wasn't anorexia or anything like that. Although I have got some symptoms of eating disorders, it's a bit complicated. But it was a sort of self-punishment, so for me that goes under the self-harm umbrella. I think I used to restrict food because the feeling you'd get when you didn't eat for 3 days was, you know, you'd be lightheaded and you felt sick and you felt cold and incredibly hungry and you were just in a lot of pain. You get aches and pains everywhere and it was a horrible feeling, but it used to distract me from the other feelings that I had, and for me that was a relief because the feelings I was having inside my head were just too much to cope with, so it was a relief for me to have a physical kind of pain that I could go to instead, so I didn't have to think about the way I was feeling. As for the second part of that question, why did I self-harm or why do I? I've decided not to talk about why for a number of reasons, but I can say that it was because I felt and feel a lot of anger inside me, a lot of hurt that I don't feel like I'm able to express and that I wasn't able to express when I was younger. It's a very difficult situation and I feel very trapped. And it's a very unique situation. I know I'm not the only one in the world with it, but it's a complicated one, which is too difficult to explain. And also, I love the people involved very much, so it's difficult for me to talk about. So that's why I'm not going to talk about exactly why. Question number 2 is, what did your parents do when they found out and how did you tell them? I want to preface this answer by saying that I am telling you this out of love for you, so that you can know that you're not alone if you've had a similar experience to me. I don't say this out of spite. I love both of my parents a lot, and I'm really sorry if I get a bit upset talking about this because it's still very raw for me, and I think you might understand why when I tell you about it. I didn't tell my mum about the self-harm, but she found out because the school rang her. My school rang her. One of my best friends told a teacher that she was worried about me, and you know what, I really love her for doing that. There was no way she could have understood my home situation properly because I never spoke about it in detail, so she thought she was doing what was right. And the fact that she went to someone because she was so worried about me, you know, she must have agonised about that. I really value her so much for that. I'm not in contact with her that much anymore, but you know, she'll always mean a lot to me because she really cared about me and she tried to help. But anyway, the school rang my mum because they knew that I was cutting my arms and I wasn't eating and I was depressed and potentially going through a breakdown. I was. They didn't know that at the time, and they didn't know about the family situation, obviously, which probably would have helped because they wouldn't have rung home that if they'd known about that, but they did ring home. There's no way I can stop that now, it's happened. When my mum found out about it, she actually tried to kick me out of the house. So she told me she didn't want me living under her roof anymore, that I was selfish and manipulative and twisted, and she didn't want me under her roof and that I should just go. So that was very upsetting. Luckily my grandma was there at the time. My grandma seems to always be there when these big family things happen, and she sat with me, and I remember my mum sitting across from me with my brother. I think my brother was there. She was on the sofa across from my grandma and I just remember her snarling at me and shouting at me, and just, I don't know, I just felt like the smallest, most worthless person in the world. I felt dreadful, and just thinking about it makes me feel really bad. But luckily my grandma persuaded her to let me stay, and she calmed her down a little bit. She stuck up for me. I just remember my grandma hugging me the whole time. It was like she was trying to shield me from the words. That's a really emotional memory for me. It was so sad. I think that my mum was angry because I'd been hiding it from her as well, and the thing is, I'd hidden it from her and my brother because I didn't want to upset them with it. You know, I was in a really bad place, and I didn't want to trouble. I mean, no one was listening. At that time, nobody was there to listen to me anyway. You know, I didn't have anybody I could turn to at all. I was completely alone, but I was determined I wasn't going to go to my little brother because obviously he's younger than me, and I didn't want to put any extra stress on him. And I couldn't go to my mum for lots of reasons. And so I did it in secret, but somehow that got twisted into me being manipulative, and I don't know, it was just the most awful situation, and I just still think about it all the time. And I don't think I'll ever forgive my mum for that, really. I love her a lot, and I really hope that she wouldn't mind me making this video, but I think it's important because I want other parents to know, other mothers especially, to know that if your child comes to you and your child is self-harming and they're depressed, then they don't do it, they haven't done it to hurt you or to manipulate you. Like, what they want is they want you to just give them a hug and tell them it's going to be alright. Please don't scream at them, please, because if you're self-harming, then you're inwardly screaming at yourself all the time. You hate yourself, basically. And you don't want to make your kid feel as worthless as I felt and still kind of do feel. So please don't do that. My dad didn't find out about it until after I had attempted suicide. I had a very sporadic relationship with my dad back then. Him and my mum divorced when I was 3.5, and at first I saw him quite a lot, but then the contact just fizzled out. There was a lot of arguing between my two families, or between my dad and my mum, and there were a lot of issues there, which I'm not going to go into in this video, and eventually it just caused this massive wedge, and I stopped seeing my dad for years. I didn't see him for such a long time. He just wasn't there anymore, and I even grew to feel really negatively towards him. I think because of the environment I grew up in. I think when you come from a broken family that's kind of at war, and you live with one side of that family, I think you absorb a lot of stuff that you don't mean to, but you're a kid, so you do. Luckily I've got rid of that now, so it's all better. But my dad was kind of just back in my life at that point, and my mum contacted him. My mum said to him, look, Claudia has taken an overdose and she's been self-harming and stuff, so I'm very worried about her. And that's how my dad found out, so I didn't tell him, and we've never really spoken about it, really. My dad is like an optimistic person. He's like my driving force. So he'll ring up, and when I'm feeling bad, he'll give me like little pep talks, and he'll help me, you know, plan my future and really get me going and get me motivated. So that's kind of the way we connect over it. But we've never spoken about it other than him occasionally saying, you know, you're not still doing that, are you? And me answering no, even if I am. But yeah, so it's a lot easier with my dad, but I haven't been able to talk about it to anybody in my family. Question number 3 is, what do you do instead of self-harm now? This is a really good question after the last one, because the last one was a really sad one. I haven't self-harmed in 2 months. I actually hadn't self-harmed for about 6 months before that, and then I had a little relapse. But that's okay, when you're in recovery you do relapse sometimes. But now it's been another 2 months or so, so I'm doing really well. So what do I do personally? I write in a journal, and I used to write on big sheets of paper. I bought this A3 really cheap pad of paper and some coloured pens, And for a while I used to, when I was feeling really bad, I would just go in my bedroom and shut the door and just scribble on them. So I'd be writing like swear words and names and drawing on it and just scribbling and writing down what was making me angry and even just little petty things that had irritated me in the day, and I was just letting it all go. And that really did used to help me, but that backfired because the one time my mum came in without knocking and she found like me with all the papers around me, and she picked up the papers and read them all, and she was just really angry and disgusted, and she threatened to take them to my brother. Yeah, that was just really bad. So I don't do that anymore, although it used to really help. I don't do that anymore, but writing about it does help, you know, or getting it out somehow, because right now I do it on my laptop, so I just make a Word document and just type what I'm feeling, so that can help, or if you have a journal that can really help. But yeah, writing on big paper is a great idea if you've got a family that wouldn't mind you doing that. A really good one is music. I have a playlist on my iPod which is just really loud, angry music, and it helps me so much. I also have a Florence and the Machine playlist because I just find that that music reminds me of who I am. Obviously that might not be Florence and the Machine for you, but if you've got a band that you really connect to or something, then that can really help because it reminds you of your kind of sense of self and who you are, and it kind of brings you back a bit. But that can be really helpful. I listen to it really loudly in my ears, and that's probably not a healthy thing to do, but it really helps me because it drowns everything out and I can just lose myself in these songs, and that is just really helpful. In a specific type of self-harm mood, I go to my Anne Boleyn book, my favourite Anne Boleyn book that I've got, and I just open it at any page and just start reading. So that really helps me because Anne Boleyn is a very inspirational force in my life, and I've kind of used her as this kind of beacon of hope and strength, and when I think about her she makes me feel inspired, and she makes me want to be a stronger person, and she makes me feel resilient and like I should keep fighting. So that really helps me. So maybe if you've got a book that you really love, or a person that you really admire, then you could look them up online, or look at a picture of them or something, just something simple like that. I wish I could meet Anne just so I could tell her thank you, because the amount of times I've turned to her in a moment of real need, it's really helped me basically. Some actual alternatives for self-harm which I've tried are, there's the one where you ping an elastic band on your wrist. So you put the elastic band on your wrist when you're feeling angry. Instead of cutting your wrist or cutting your arm, you will pull back the elastic band and ping it on your wrist, and it really hurts. It kind of feels all stingy and horrible. It doesn't actually help me, that method, because for me, something about seeing the blood and actually hurting myself was part of why I did what I did. It was kind of a form of self-punishment in a way. But I know that works for a lot of people, so don't discount it just because it didn't work for me. Loads of people find real relief from that, so that's something you can try. Another one is holding an ice cube in your hand. Obviously when you hold the ice cube in your hand, it's really cold, but it feels like it's burning. But that's good because it's like a substitute for pain, but again, it's not really going to actually hurt you in the long run. I would do this, but I can't because my family would notice if I went to the freezer to get some ice, and I wouldn't want that. So, but if you have a family which wouldn't mind, then you know that's a really good idea, because I've done it once before and it really helped me. The best method, in my opinion, is drawing on your arms, because where I wanted to make a mark with the knife, now I just make a mark with a coloured pen. I bought myself like a pack of coloured pens, like really cheap coloured felt tips, and when I feel like I want to cut, I just write on my arms now, and I decorate them, and I put stars and hearts and flowers, and I write Anne's name, and I write other names and quotes on my arms, and it's great because it distracts you. And it makes you feel that sense of self again. It draws you back, you're reminded of what's important to you, and it's just it's a nice thing to do. And you feel really proud when you wake up in the morning. My self-harm urges usually happen at night, in the evening. It's nice to wake up in the morning and see that you've drawn on your arm and you've made something beautiful there instead of being destructive. I actually took a couple of pictures of one that I did just because I felt so proud of myself for getting past this particularly dark night. I might show you that. I think I might put that on the screen for you, but I'm very proud of that. Question number 4 is, what makes a person self-harm? I can't answer for everyone, obviously. Everyone has different reasons for doing it. I can answer for me. I can talk about it vaguely, but again not in detail for a number of reasons. There's a lot of reasons why I can't talk about it properly, and I really would like to, but It's just not possible. So I guess it's when I feel so much anger that I can't express. It's when I feel injustice and like I'm being stifled, like I'm trapped, and there's no way of me safely expressing that feeling without making things worse. I think I don't get upset in the slightest when people like anonymously send me hate mail and that kind of thing. Being a feminist on the internet, like I get that quite a lot, but that really doesn't bother me very much. But for me, it's when the people around me, people who I'm very close to, say things that are just cruel and unnecessary. I feel worthless, and I feel like I'm being physically ripped apart until I'm nothing. I think the people close to me, certain people close to me, have that power over me, and I wish they didn't, but I feel like every word just tears me apart a little bit more. So I think the self-harm in a way is like tearing myself apart. It's like this misplaced anger, and I want to aim anger at somebody else, but I can't, and I aim it at myself instead, and it's a punishment because I feel so useless and worthless, and it's just a very complicated situation. And these feelings have been inside me for a very long time, and there's no way they can get out, and they never have been able to get out. Maybe one day I'll be able to express it properly, but right now there's no one I can do that with who's outside of it. So, but maybe one day that will happen, I don't know. I think that if you're the same as me, then you might know what I'm talking about. I think you'll probably know. I think you'll be able to relate to this. So without me actually talking about it properly, I think you'll know. So you're not on your own, and I have been there and I'm there right now, so don't worry, and we can get through it. Question number 5 is, do you cover your scars, and have you ever covered them? At school I covered my arms. They were, I had cuts up both of my forearms and on my shoulders as well. So I did used to wear long sleeve t-shirts all the time, and like jumpers and things, even when it was really hot. And I remember I was a performing arts student, and we had to do some dance rehearsals, and we were doing this rock and roll routine, and it was quite athletic. There were lots of lifts and things, and I remember spending this whole 50-minute lesson like trying to keep my long sleeves down, like trying to hold them down while dancing, and also trying not to wince or make any sort of flinching or anything. No flinching movements when my partner and other people in the dance would accidentally brush my arms, that kind of thing, because it was painful. That's quite difficult for me, and that entire lesson really sticks in my head. I was at a very bad place then, so I did used to cover them up, yes. Now I don't bother to cover them up because like I said before, I mean, I live at home, and I live with my mum and my brother, and I don't really go out very much, so there's nobody I need to hide them for. My family know I do it. They're scars now, so they're used to them, I guess. I have bought some fingerless gloves from eBay for the days when, if I were to relapse, you know, if they were fresh and I wanted to hide them, because the reaction from my family when I do cut my arms is extremely negative. I mean, I absolutely dread my mum seeing them after I've done them, and I try to hold that moment off as long as I can, so I cover them for a little while, and then in the end, you know, you think they've faded a bit more, but, you know, she'll notice when you're in the kitchen doing something, and, you know, then suddenly you're manipulative and twisted and, I don't know, selfish and that kind of thing, and that stuff stays with you. So I hide them. I guess I still hide them if they're new now, but they're not often new now because I don't do it anymore, or I hardly ever do it anymore. So, but I'm not ashamed of my scars. I'm not ashamed of my scars. They just show that I've lived through it and that I got through it. So in a way, I'm kind of proud of them. The next question on my list is, in what ways did you self-harm? The main way I self-harmed was I used to cut my forearms with a penknife, and my shoulders occasionally, but not that often. I used to restrict food, so I wouldn't eat for about 3 days until I felt like I was going to pass out, and then I would eventually eat. I over-exercised to get bruises. When I first started hooping, I was deliberately doing it too much to try and bruise myself. That was not good, and I didn't acknowledge that was self-harm at the time. I felt like I didn't want to admit that to myself, really, that was what I was doing, but that was what I was doing, and it's not healthy. So now obviously I set myself time limits when I hoop, and I don't deliberately try and bruise myself when I do that. But I guess that's how deep the compulsion lies in me. A couple of times I bashed my head against the wall. I didn't do that very much, to be honest. It didn't do much for me. I used to, I think this is more of a stress reaction, but I used to like peel the skin off my lips. I'm sorry, that's really gross, but I did used to kind of peel the skin off my lips, so that was really stingy and it hurt. And also I took too many tablets a few times. Obviously when I overdosed, I was aiming for, you know, actually leaving. But before that I used to take quite a few tablets at a time. And it was kind of, I just didn't have a plan. I just wanted to punish myself, and I thought if I died, then I died, and I didn't care. So I guess that was a form of self-harm as well. And finally, my last question is, what advice do you have for people who self-harm? I really want you to know that self-harming does not make you a bad person, and it doesn't make you a weak person. It doesn't make you manipulative, and it doesn't make you selfish, okay? People will tell you those things, but that's not what it is. You're just a person that's in pain, and you deserve to be cared for and loved. It's like how animals, if they're caught in traps, sometimes they actually gnaw off their own limbs to free themselves, and I think that's kind of what it's like. I think that we get into such a bad place, and we feel like there's nothing that can be done, and we don't know what to do, and we just take it out on ourselves. We just punish ourselves because we're in that much pain. That's nothing to be ashamed of. You know, if you're in that much pain, then I just don't understand why people would put you down when you're already in enough pain that you're actually mutilating yourself. But just please know that it doesn't make you a weak person or a bad person at all. It just means that you're a person who's going through some troubles and needs some help. I would advise you to see a professional, definitely. So maybe go and see a doctor, or ring up a local helpline. I'm not going to make a list of that because, you know, I've got viewers from all over the place. But you can look that up online. If you're watching this, you've got internet access. So, you know, look up your local helplines. I really would advise, maybe if there's someone close to you, like a close family member that you trust, if there's someone you can talk to, then utilise that. Because I don't have that and I didn't have that. But if I had, then I think things would be different. What I do have is I'm able to ring my grandma when I feel very low. She said to me I can ring her. So although I can't talk about everything, I do have an outlet, and I do have a person that I can go to if things get very, very extreme. So if there's a person you can go to, then that's always a great idea. Try the techniques I described if you can, and there's no guarantee that they'll work, but you might find one that works for you, just like I found one with drawing on my arm. And also don't feel bad if you relapse. Relapsing is a part of recovery. It doesn't mean that you failed. Recovery is a process that goes on for a long time, and it's not easy. It doesn't just steadily get better and better and better. You know, you have some dips in the road, but if you stick with it, you can get somewhere. You know, there is a way to recover from it. You don't have to be self-harming all the time. I was in a place where I was self-harming every single day, and I don't self-harm for months on end now, and I'm just getting better and better, so it is possible. Please be kind to yourself. I know it's so easy to, when you're in that state, to think about all the bad things about yourself. Like every negative thing anyone's ever said about you just pops into your head and it makes you feel worthless. But you have to try and think about yourself as you would think about a friend. So imagine if you had a friend who was in the same situation, a friend that you loved and admired and respected. You'd be kind to them, wouldn't you? You'd give them a hug and you'd give them some support. Give yourself that same support if you can. You've got to love yourself and know that you are worth something and you're important, and no matter what anyone says to you, that doesn't change that. It doesn't change it at all. You're still an important person. I get so angry when people bring down others for showing weakness. Self-harm is not a weakness. In fact, if anything, it's a strength. The fact that you're still here and you feel that bad, that is a strength, and you're a strong person, and I respect and admire you, and you can get through this. So that's the end of my video for today. I know it's very long, but I hope it was helpful. There's going to be lots of people I know in the comment section saying that they don't think I should be talking about this kind of thing, that, you know, I'm attention seeking and that kind of thing, but I can tell you from the heart, honestly, that when I was at my worst, I was hunting the internet for people talking about their experiences so I wouldn't feel alone. That's why I'm doing this. I know it helps, and if it helps one person, then it's absolutely worth it. I really, really hope that things get better for you, and I just really love and respect and admire you, and you can get through this. You're not a weak person. You're a very important person. You're a very strong person, and a lot more people than you might think have self-harmed before. or do self-harm. It's just that because of the stigma, a lot of us keep quiet, but there's a lot of us out there, and it doesn't make you any less of a person. Okay, I'm going to go now. I love you very much, and I'll see you soon. Bye!